Do you think that powerful people want to share power?
No, not generally. I think that's why there is such the divide that there is. I think people, work hard to get themselves into positions to be at the top, and generally they don't want to give that up. There's been some really good things written about the way that very rich people can influence politicians and policies that are developed, and they can have an influence, for example, in the kind of taxation policies there are. So if we don't pay attention to what other people want, we're going to be creating a whole situation where people are just pushing back the whole time on the effects that other people are creating on the environment. And so, this idea about if I pay attention to what you want and help you get the things that you want, that's going to make my environment better for me as well. So, it really is, it's not just a kind of a schmaltzy socialist sort of idea about getting everyone to play nicely together. It actually is an imperative that when people are in an environment that they both share, the most efficient way for them to share that environment is by helping each other make it be the way each other wants it to be.
So you speak about empowerment and rebuilding structures to help vulnerable populations. What would you say is a vulnerable population?
That's a great question. I guess in terms of empowerment, it's really, I would think of vulnerable populations as populations that don't have the resources within their control to be able to live the lives that they would wish for themselves, really.
Right, right. And you also speak about empowerment and what would you say empowerment is when you're talking about it?
Yeah, I think my impression is that there's a couple of different ways of thinking about empowerment, and it's often used in the sense of some people doing things to other people so that the other people um, can have more choices and freedom and so on. And I think that's in lots of ways it's a really good thing. The caution I have with it is that when some people are empowering other people, if they have the ability to empower people, then they also have the ability to disempower people. And I think that's that's a concern. So for me, the ideal would be to arrange environments and resources so that people can empower themselves and not have to rely on other people to empower them. So I think we need policies, for example, and laws that protect people and that provide environments so that people can empower themselves rather than having to rely on other people to empower them.
Right. Like you write about structural empowerment and you write only powerful people, yes, can empower people. What would you say that looks like, Dr. Carey, if you're creating a system where you're empowering people more?
Yeah. I think there are lots of ways we could be empowering people. So in workplaces, for example, there are often situations where managers and supervisors can be quite unreasonable in their expectations, for example. And I think workplaces could perhaps do more in terms of ensuring that policies that they have are followed through with. There can be situations where because someone is in a management position that they have certain privileges and opportunities that other people don't. So that's an obvious place where I think there can be opportunities for whoever is in the workplace to be able to, advance their careers and develop in the ways that they want to and not have to rely on the authority of a manager or a supervisor um, to give them those opportunities.
You know what? That's a very good point because that's literally the opinion of one person. Isn't that interesting? Like, so it's you can create the structure in a more fair way or a way that, yeah, yeah. There's a scientist, and I can't even think of the example he gave, but there's a popular scientist here in America. His name is Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Have you heard of
Hmm.
him?
No,
But you said no.
no.
No. Okay.
I'll have to read up on him.
Yeah, he does write books. He does write books. I think he wrote something like a book called Physics for People in a Hurry or something like that. He's a good communicator with
Ah,
science.
yeah,
Very
yeah,
fun.
wonderful.
But he was talking about that when it comes to school. He said that he was saying like school is super narrow and highly focused on, you
Mm.
know, yeah, like what grades you get and how, basically what grades you get. And he was saying
Mhm.
that like he was a C student in school, but look at him now. Like he's a really good
Mm.
scientist. He's a really good scientist communicator. And he was saying that there should be more like a wider path. Like you should look at what's going on in the kid's life. Are they really good at home? Are they really very, you know what I mean? Like very resilient, like other things besides did the person get the
Mm.
A or the C? So I definitely can
Yeah.
see that. So do you think that powerful people want to share power?
No, not generally. I think that's why there is such the divide that there is. I think people, work hard to get themselves into positions to be at the top, and generally they don't want to give that up. There's been some really good things written about the way that very rich people can influence politicians and policies that are developed, and they can have an influence, for example, in the kind of taxation policies there are, um, so people aren't taxed equitably, that there are big differences in how much tax people can pay. And ironically, the people at the top with the most resources are often the ones who can find ways of getting out of paying the tax that they should perhaps be paying.
That is a very good point. I don't know that Dr. Carey, have you heard about younger men being considered more of a vulnerable population, sort of in America?
I haven't heard of it specifically in America, but it doesn't surprise me at all. When I was a school teacher, I was a special education teacher for a while, and it was really obvious there that the rates of learning difficulties, for example, and things like autism are much higher in males than females. So yeah, I thought have thought for a long time that males are a really vulnerable population. Suicide rates, for example,
Yeah.
are a lot higher with men than women.
Yeah, suicide rates are higher right now. There's millions of guys who are working age who can't get a job, or I don't know if they
Hmm.
can or not looking. Millions, like I think 10 million was the last
Mm.
number that I saw. Like a lot of people from I think 25 to 15, 5 or something
Hmm.
like that. But like
Yeah.
you said, yeah, like you said, the suicide rates are high. A lot of guys are dropping out of college, and a lot of guys are not going to therapists. And I think part of it too is because there's just not a lot of male therapists. There's not a lot of people that
Mm.
like them. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that at all? I mean, I know you didn't write about it. I'm just curious, and obviously you can take it out, but I just want a great mind, curious of what a great mind would think of about that right now with guys kind of becoming more of a vulnerable population. And I don't fully understand why. I think maybe because the market, the economy has changed so much, and it maybe was more of
Mm.
a strength economy now, and now it's a more who's better at empathy to some extent, or I don't know because I don't really know what it is, but it just seems like certain jobs are just not as popular as they used to be, and it's domino, kind of like a domino effect.
Hmm.
But I don't know if you have any thoughts on some of that in general when it comes to.
Well, I think I think there are lots of nuances to things like discrimination and equity and topics like that. And it's clear that, with the human rights movement, that there was a lot of work that we needed to do to ensure that females had equal opportunities and the same access to opportunities and resources and so on as males did. And there's still, in different areas, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. And certainly with racial equity as well, there's still a long way to go there. But whenever whenever we promote the interests or rights of one group, there is a chance that we can be discriminating against another group. And as a school teacher, I can remember oh quite a few years ago now when we were first when the idea about first encouraging girls to go into sciences and mathematics and so on. And I can remember thinking then, well, why aren't we also encouraging boys to go into the arts and
Right.
reading and humanities? And it's kind of played out like that. We could still have more women in the maths and sciences kind of areas, and they contribute a lot in that way. But we could also have more men in the other areas. And I know it's the learning difficulties with boys in school are really high, reading difficulties. So so I think it's rather than having lots of divisions, I'd like to see a greater awareness about helping individuals develop and be able to live the lives that they each individually want to live, rather than thinking about promoting one group over.
You're right. And you also speak about this too in an article, and you wrote about this very well. You said that like we're kind of becoming our own, our differences are killing us was the title. It was talking about how our differences are killing us. And you also kind of similar to that point, you were talking about part of an issue that we're sometimes we have is when we're thinking of what people deserve or their value
Mm,
instead of it's like it might create more problems than it solves. It's kind of, yeah, you were saying we should kind of more think about what people are trying to control for and, obviously try to help them more with that if it's ethical, like they're not trying to control by killing people and stuff like that. But, you
mm.
know, but can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think as humans, we all have certain requirements to be able to live lives of meaning or value, or even just the lives of our own design, the lives that we would wish for ourselves. And in some ways, I think the human rights movement has been extremely valuable, but there's also been a bit of a downside, I think. I think certain things shouldn't are even more fundamental than being a basic human right. I think things like we don't typically talk about things like digestion or homeostasis being basic human rights. And so I think things like the idea of autonomy or self-determination should be even more fundamental than a human right. It's a property of the way we're designed. In order to be able to live well, we need to be able to have access to certain things and to be able to make certain decisions and so on. And I think that's what I would like to see more awareness of and more reflected in our policies and laws and so on.
Right. That's interesting. It would I think a lot of agency would come with more work flexibility too, like schedule wise.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's lots and lots of different ways that we could be if there was a greater awareness of the importance of agency and how just what a fundamental aspect that was to our existence, then I think that could be better reflected in things like policies and laws and procedures and so on.
Okay, so a great discussion or that you have in one of your articles is you ask this question, are you helping or interfering? Can you speak a little bit about that? You also talk about what doesn't mean to give good advice, but I don't want to have
Sorry,
you
that's no, no, you
you
go.
were yeah, you were talking about are you helping or interfering? And you were
Mm,
getting the reader to think about whenever you're um trying to help somebody with reaching a goal,
hmm
are you helping them or are you interrupting that goal? Are you interfering with them trying to reach that goal? And you were
hmm
speaking about that in the article. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all starts with the idea of whose perspective are you adopting, and whose perspective is prioritized, I guess. And the work that I do comes from the idea of thinking about life and the process of living from the inside looking out. And so it's the first person perspective that I think is really the priority. And yet, a lot of psychology was developed on the basis of what we can observe about behavior. So, kind of like a third person perspective. So, that was regarded as being scientific and getting away from just being subjective and being like personal opinion, I guess. That if we could just document and record the behavior that we observe, then that would allow us to, establish ideas and theories of behavior. But the behavior that we observe is just one perspective. And often what we observe people doing isn't what they are doing from their perspective. And it's really that individual, internal, from the inside looking out perspective that's the key to life as it is experienced. So it's that perspective that has to be at the forefront of all of our decision making. And sometimes when we're intentionally trying to help someone, so our intentions are very good, but if we're helping someone from our perspective, then there's a chance that it won't be helpful from their perspective.
Right. So you do speak about this. You talk about how do we know Dr. Carey for giving good advice?
Well, again, I think we have to rely on the person that we're giving the advice to, that there are lots of subtle ways when we're talking to another person, we can be giving them our ideas about how we think the situation is and what we think they could do. But there are lots of like the person might frown or they might shake their head or they might say yes, but, and often we can get into a situation where we try harder to convince them that this is the right way that they should be going. Whereas a better approach might be to back off and to explore their perspective a little bit more until we get a clearer sense of the way they're understanding the situation and what the difficulty is and what they think the solution might be.
Right. So you basically say in this article that good advice is only good if the person you're giving the advice to thinks it's good or uses it
Yeah.
or something of
hmm
that nature,
If it's helpful to them. Yeah.
if it's helpful to them. Who are self-help books really for? Or who are they about? Is what I should say. That's not worded well. Who are self-help books about? Why do you think self-help books are not, it doesn't get the effect a lot of times that the author wants?
I think primarily self-help books are collections of advice and suggestions and ideas about how people can live their lives better or more effectively. And so I think the idea about self-help books is really great. I think any resource that helps people live more of the life they want to live is fantastic, and there should be more of them. The problem with self-help books is that it again gets back to that idea of perspective, that a self-help book can only ever be written from the perspective of the author of the self-help book. And the authors often live in very different circumstances and conditions and contexts to the people who will be reading their books. So the idea that what I might think is the best solution for you to live your life more like the way you'd like to live it is really off the mark, I think. I can't offer suggestions for how someone living in a completely different context with different goals and dreams and priorities, I can't possibly suggest what they should be doing in their circumstances to get more of what they want. So I think as a society, as a population, we really have missed the mark in terms of how best to help people. That when people are in tricky situations and when they're in places where they're not getting what they want, I don't think they need advice. What they need is to be able to see things from a different perspective, or to be able to think through their problems and get a different angle on the way they're approaching things. And that can only ever happen from their perspective.
Right, right. I'm thinking of some actual good advice that I've had before. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's people. It is like kind of rethinking how you think about something. When I've used it, it's reshaping what I thought about something. And a lot of times there has to be the context has to be right too. If that makes sense.
Yep,
Be right.
yep.
It's
Yeah.
like
My son and I just had a really interesting conversation about advice just a couple of weeks ago. And I was really surprised in the conversation because he was telling me that he'd found the advice I've given him to be really helpful. And I was shocked actually because I thought I worked really hard to not give people advice. So I was really surprised that he'd he'd felt like I'd been advising him in certain situations. And so we had a really interesting conversation. And what came out was that he didn't ever feel like I was telling him what to do or giving him instructions or guiding him. But from time to time, I shared my observations about certain things like, oh, when we were out at the restaurant, I noticed this, or he gets tennis lessons. And in the tennis lessons, I noticed that he often disagrees with his coach about how something happens. And so I'd shared those observations with him. And he used that information to kind of reflect on his relationship with his coach and what he wanted to get out of tennis and so on. So we had a really interesting conversation about intention. And even though it wasn't my intention to give him advice or to steer him or guide him, he had taken the information that I'd shared and used that to kind of make things better for himself. So sometimes things can be advice even when the person giving it doesn't intend for it to be advice. And so once again, it all comes back to perspective and the person who's using the information to make different choices and make their situation better for themselves.
that's he's using your advice, Dr. Carey. That's a proud moment. You write about embracing averageness. You write about how most people are average and how averageness is actually competent and adequate. Can you explain this more?
Yeah, I think I wrote that just as a general reaction, if you like, to this. There seems to be a constant imperative, I guess, in our society to always be better and always improve and to always strive to do your best. And I think they're really, really great ideas if that's what people want to do. But I think there could be a greater awareness that actually it's just okay just to be. We don't always have to be better than we were yesterday. That actually just kind of being here is okay, and just getting on and putting one foot in front of the other and just getting through the day and being okay, coming home at night and being with your family or whoever you want to be with, or not being with anyone if that's what you want to be. But we don't constantly, I don't think, have to be better than we were yesterday. And unless you want to, and if you want to do that, then knock yourself out, have a great time. But there's absolutely no imperative There's no law or no kind of special edict that from the moment we're born we have to constantly be better than we were before. So it's really just that idea that just I guess I'd like to see more awareness or more permission, if you like, in society that it's okay just to chill out and just to enjoy who we are and what we are and just to be.
You wrote that adequacy and competency are actually closer than people think. How so?
Well, just being adequate and being competent. Again, I don't think, I think completing a task competently means you've covered it. You know, you've done everything that needs to be done. It doesn't have to be excellent or ideal in every possible situation. That just getting the job done should.
Ah, I see. I see. Have you ever wondered why we're so obsessed with, or why I don't know, why we struggle with being average? With you writing about mattering, there must be a link there. So you wrote about the paradoxical nature of wanting to matter and what that would mean and look like. What is it about mattering that is paradoxical?
Well, that came about. I went and watched the new Wolverine and Deadpool movie with my wife and son, and I'm a big Hugh Jackman fan and big Ryan Reynolds fan, so it was a fantastic movie. Wouldn't be everyone's ideal way to spend a couple of hours, but I thought it was sensational. They're such great guys. And right at the end of the movie, the Deadpool character is kind of reflecting on things and he's doing this narration and he says everyone wants to matter. And that those few words really got me thinking about, is that right? Does everyone want to matter? And who do they want to matter to? And why is it important to want to matter? And when do we first get the idea that it's important to matter? Do tiny little kids, 2 and 3 year old children, do they want to matter? And could the idea of mattering, could that even be a problem sometimes? And might there be a way that as long as we matter to ourselves, then it doesn't matter if we matter to other people? And I guess the one of the implications about mattering that I thought could be important was that if we want to matter to other people, then essentially we get locked into having to do what other people want us to do. So, and I used a couple of examples of, if there's someone who I really want to matter to and they think that education, for example, is important, or having a lot of followers on TikTok, then I have to do those things. If I want to matter to them, I have to do the things that are important to them, whether or not they're the things that are important to me. So, so I thought the whole idea of mattering could be something that we looked at a little bit more closely in terms of helping people live the lives that matter.
Right? So you basically need to, if you want to matter to people, you have to do the things that matter to them, literally.
That matter to them. Yes. Yeah.
So there is a sense of yeah, there's some control there. The only
Mm.
person that I can think of that I matter to no matter what is my mom.
Uh-huh.
Like your parents, it seems like that's like the only relationship where it just almost doesn't matter in a way. The
Yeah, and it
only
doesn't matter. Isn't that interesting? You know, that it and you said that you matter to your mum no matter what. And I guess that's the ideal kind of mattering, that
Yeah.
having that sense that there are some people I matter to, and it doesn't matter what I do, I will still matter to them.
She's the only person. I don't think let's be clear. I don't think there's anybody else. I don't know if you're lucky, Dr. Carey. I don't know. Maybe you're lucky.
Oh, I don't know. I would think the same thing. If there's even a person, that's a kind of a pretty special thing to have.
Very, very special. Do you think that does it matter if we matter? Well,
Hmm.
I guess to each his
That
own.
Yeah, exactly right. I think that's an individually answered question. You know, and I think whatever the answer is, if it's right for you, it's right for you. You know, if it matters to you to matter, then that just means you'll live your life in a certain way. And if it doesn't matter to you to matter, then you'll live a different kind of life. And maybe that's the point, that either option is okay. It really depends on the individual and their perspective.
You write about people having trouble letting go. You write when things are difficult to let go can be, it is because some aspect of it is still important. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think letting go actually happens all the time with all sorts of things. When letting go doesn't happen, it's that's the out of the ordinary thing. And so I think it gets really interesting to try and understand why letting go hasn't happened. And if you think about it, if you think about the life that someone lives, by the time they even get to their mid 20s, even, so they've lived on the planet for 25 years, they've had zillions of experiences and things that have happened and gone on. And most of them, they probably don't even give a second thought to or can't recall at all. But some things stick in people's minds and stay with people. And so I think it can be helpful to think of that as a really active process. And so if we come at it from that perspective, the one of the interesting questions is, rather than letting go, it kind of is more interesting to think about, why is the person holding on to a particular thing that hasn't been let go yet? And there are usually really good reasons that something hasn't been let go. So that can, for things that are problems for people, it can be really illuminating to look at it from that angle and that perspective, to think about what it is about that particular event or situation that I'm hanging on to, that I don't want to let go of just yet.
Right. It sounds like it's a good step towards problem solving. Like, you
Hmm.
know, if you have a friend that you can't let go of, or relationship,
Hmm.
or you know, there's an element there that if you examine it, that okay, I can let go of this, I can let go of that, this is fine, but this is
Hmm.
where I'm struggling. Okay, yeah, okay. So that there's that element that
Mm.
can get
Yeah.
you. Gotcha.
Well, and I think you know, a lot of it can be terminology. So the flip side of letting go is holding on. And so rather than thinking about letting go of something, you could be thinking about, why am I holding on to something? What is it about that thing that I want to keep holding on to for now? And when people can answer that question, then they can make more of a, I guess, a conscious decision about whether they do keep holding on to it, or whether they let go of it. And often it can be that sense of, the real kind of botheration in the letting go idea is that people can have the sense that it's not really them doing it, that they really want to let go of this thing, but they just
Right.
can't. And so thinking about the other side can kind of help them get a sense of the role they're playing in why that particular thing is hanging around.
Right. No, I think that's a very good perspective of basically what am I holding on to, because a lot of times people just ruminate and they think thoughts like that. I
Mm.
can't let go. I can't let go. And they don't really they don't problem solve really. Maybe
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe
Hmm.
they don't want to, but it's just more I guess efficient to think, well, what is it that I'm trying to hold on to is I think a better thing to think about and assess
Mm.
than because you know, you ruminate and you think you're solving problems. A lot of times you're not. You're just thinking about the same thing over and over
Yes, yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes even really simple questions, like when I've been working as a clinical psychologist and people have said to me, I just can't let go of whatever. Even asking them, well, do you want to let go of it? And you would be surprising because it that just seems like such a dumb question when someone's telling you they can't let go of something. But to actually ask them if they want to let go of it, most times people will kind of pause and think about it and say, oh, well, actually, and then come up with some words and information that give you an opportunity to explore things more. And it can actually be really liberating for people to think about what it is they're hanging on to and the why they're not ready just yet to let go of whatever it is they're still holding on to.
And you know what, Dr. Carey, it could be a conflict they don't realize
Mm,
with goals, maybe, like you
yep.
speak about. So it can be that what happened wasn't a goal or that they wanted to happen, or it's conflicting with something else, another goal, you know? You write about indecisiveness and you break down what it means to be indecisive mainly by talking about the fact that everything we do, which is kind of what I'm leading up to, is about goal setting and achieving. And indecisiveness comes along when there is a conflict or two goals you want to achieve at the same time, when there's two goals you want to achieve at the same time, but you can't. Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think if we start from the perspective that we're we're goal-driven creatures, so everything we do could be considered from the perspective of being a goal. And some people don't like the word goal, but for me, a goal is just a particular state of affairs or a state of the world that you like to be a certain way. So there are lots and lots of other words that get at the same idea, like a need or a priority or a
Right.
ambition or a want, anything that says a preference so that you want or prefer something to be this way rather than that way. So when we can't decide that we want something to be a particular way, usually, rather than there not being any goal, it usually means that there are two competing goals. So I want to be both at work finishing that report, but I also want to be at home with my family having dinner. And you can't be both in the office and at home at the same time. So there can be an experience when that situation arises. There can be an experience of what we might call indecision. So I want to stay. No, no, I want to go home. No, I can't go home just yet. I have to finish. And there can be a kind of a dithering or a going backwards and forwards that comes about because there are too many goals, not enough goals.
Right. So then, Dr. Carey, how do you help somebody with that? They have these two goals that are competing and they don't realize it. You know, until you technically say something like that, a lot of people don't realize that's kind of what's going on. There's goals competing, and because there's conflict there, they can't have them both. That's when they get
Mm,
indecisive. So then
yeah.
then how do you help them solve that without
Hmm.
giving them
Hmm.
advice?
Yeah, without giving advice. And that's exactly why when there's a goal conflict going on, that's exactly why advice and suggestions aren't effective because there is no advice that you can give someone so that they can both be in the office and at home at the same time. There is no kind of logical solution to that. But where the solution does come from, and this again gets back to the way we're kind of constructed or designed, if you like, is that every goal comes from somewhere. And the way we're generally put together is that we use certain goals to help us achieve more important goals. So we have goals for keeping our car in a certain position on the road because we want to get to a destination. And our goal to get to the destination is because we want to be able to spend the day at work, and we want to spend the day at work because we want to earn a good salary, and we want to earn a good salary because we want to live the life we want to live. So all of those things are goals, and we use simple goals to help us achieve kind of more complex and more important goals. So the goal of staying at work and finishing the report is coming from somewhere, and the goal of getting home and having dinner with my family is coming from somewhere. And when people are in goal conflict, helping them kind of step back, if you like, and find the place where both of the goals are coming from. Sometimes it's somewhere like, living the life I want to live or being the best person I can be, stepping back to that more
Right.
more highly valued goal can help to generate solutions to achieving the lower order goals.
That's right. Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I didn't ask you the question already. Okay, so
That's okay.
Dr. Carey, so a little bit more about goal setting. I love your thoughts on goal setting. You said feeling great and feeling lousy are connected to goals. Then you write, when we repeatedly miss the goals we set, often it's because we have achieved another goal instead. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, if we think about everything, goal, I remember quite a few years ago now, working with a woman who'd come to see me because she was feeling really down and depressed. Her daughter had gone to see a psychologist, and the psychologist suggested that she might benefit as well. So
The
she'd come
the
along to see me.
the
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the psychologist thought the mother would benefit. And the mother in our first conversation told me that she had never achieved anything in her whole life. She'd never been successful at anything in her whole life. And I was really astounded by that statement. And if you think about, this is a woman who is kind of in her mid 30s, I guess she was. She had a daughter. So she actually, and her daughter was maybe 8 or 9 at the time. So this daughter had spent 8 or 9 years being alive in the
Yeah.
company and the care of this mother.
I don't think that would
So
happen.
for a no, no. So for a person to get to be the age of, say, let's say she was 35, for someone to have lived on the planet for 35 years and to have the perspective that they'd never achieved anything, that's a really strong view to have that I don't think could just arise accidentally. So the only way I think someone would actually get to the point where they saw themselves as never having achieved anything is if it sounds funny to say wanted to be in that position, but that must be a position that they've created for themselves. So from this perspective, I would think that the way I would kind of understand that situation is that the person had some goal that they were achieving by seeing themselves as a person who never achieved anything. Even if that sounds a bit circular, there was some benefit or some function for this woman in seeing herself as a person who never achieved anything. And so it then becomes interesting to explore with the person, if they want to explore it, what it is about seeing themselves that way that is kind of how that's playing out for them, and how their life is unfolding from that particular perspective and point of view. So that's the idea about.
Yeah, okay, so you're you're always achieving a goal, but you're always getting something out of things, even if you don't realize it. Even if it doesn't seem intuitive and it seems counterintuitive, there's something that you're getting out of even things like that.
Mhm,
Thinking, thinking of yourself in a, you know, more sad. I don't know if the word is not sad, in a more negative light.
mhm.
There's something that I never thought of it like
Yeah.
that, but that's true. There's even if you think like, oh, I'm a lousy dad, or I'm the black sheep. There's something you know, for the family or whatever. There's something you get out of think of it. So
That's the general idea. For anything that continues over time, we're normally creatures who like to keep things in balance. So when things happen and knock us out of balance, we do whatever we can to get things back in balance. So if something has persisted over time, the simplest assumption is that somehow that thing is helping that person keep whatever it is that's important to them in balance. So we were talking before about hurricanes. So, you know, bad things can happen. We can have bushfires or hurricanes or car accidents. So there are certainly bad things that can happen that throw us off balance. But when those things happen, we do what we can to correct things and rectify the situation and get things back in balance. So if over a period of months or years, I'm thinking of myself in a particular way, there must be some aspect of thinking in that way that's keeping things in balance, in some sort of balance for me from my perspective in the circumstances I'm living in. So yeah, thinking of myself as the black sheep of the family or the rebel of the family or the person who always gets things wrong from a
yeah.
certain perspective, that opinion or view of myself is keeping things in balance for me from my perspective.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting? I spoke to incel researcher. I think it was like last week. Do you know? Have you heard of incels?
Incels?
So I've heard of them. I didn't think
Hmm.
much about incels, but it's basically she in America, and I think in certain other places, it's a group of guys online. She said it's all online, and it's about involuntary celibates or something like that, guys who basically can't get laid. And she was talking about like how negatively they think of them. It was such
Hmm.
a interesting conversation. She was saying, you know, they think basically that women don't want them because they don't have great genes and because they can't offer them money the way that their fathers were able to, working in certain economies, etc. That basically they have nothing to offer them, like they're zeros. But at the same time, they are misogynistic. There's some that are and some that
Mm-hmm.
are. There's some that are just there's some that are not, and then there's some that are. There's some that are probably like more sexist, but not. And she was breaking that down, but we were really stuck on how negatively they were viewing themselves. It was very interesting. Like I guess from our perspective, it was just very interesting. They were saying things like, "I'm only 5'2". Some of them, and you know, no girl's gonna want me, and I'm like, how does that serve them? It was a very interesting I was like, you know, it was confusing. It was really confusing. I'm like, well, how does that really serve them to think that? I don't know, but in some way, it does serve them. Maybe, you know, maybe can be, you know, some people can be on the spectrum and can be a little autistic, and they're just um it's a way of them saying I can't talk to girls. Like for example, if a guy goes, I who is autistic, he's like, well, I can't talk to girls. I'm autistic, and so I'm just never gonna get a girl. You know, there's some truth to that. You are, you know, you can be autistic, but in some other way, it does serve you to go ahead and finish the statement and say, well, I can never get a girl. There's something about
Hmm.
that statement that does serve you some way somehow, because the point is you're saying if it didn't serve them in some way somehow, they wouldn't have they wouldn't believe it. So there's
Hmm.
something that people get out of thinking of, even like I was saying before, negatively about a
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't know. They
Yep.
don't know. Yeah, what it
Well,
is.
there's a few things that are kind of interesting there. So if they're talking about never being able to get a girl, they must they must want to get a
Yeah,
girl. Otherwise it wouldn't bother them. So there could be people, for example, who say they'll never have a life partner, but they don't want a life partner. So they wouldn't even that wouldn't get things out of balance for them because not having a life partner keeps things in balance. That's exactly the
right.
way they want to. live life. So they're in a situation where they want to get a girl, but for some reason they're not getting a girl, and maybe they don't want to get rejected. They're protecting themselves from putting themselves out there and getting rejected. And it sounds like they've from what you're saying, there's now a group of them who get together and talk about their joint, I guess,
Yeah.
inability to get women. So even that, I've often thought that every now and then they'll have TV shows where they'll have a like a documentary about people with really serious anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder or whatever. And I always think with those shows, not only is this a person who has some very serious obsessive compulsive, something that might be categorized as serious obsessive compulsive disorder, not only are they that person, but they're a person who's prepared to go on national television and talk about it. And that, I think, introduces a very different kind of flavor. So these people aren't just people who, for whatever reason, don't think they can get women. They're people who don't think they can get women and who are also prepared to talk to other people about that and be in a group and be, affiliated with people who seem to be similar. So it sounds to me like, again, from a goal perspective, I would think that there's a goal to have a partner, to have a female partner, but there's also some other goal going on about avoiding risks or avoiding rejection or not measuring up to an ideal stereotype, or I don't know.
Yeah, you just you're very, yeah, I don't know. You word it very well. There's another goal going on that they don't recognize. And not just that, I think that's an example with a lot of us a lot of the time. There's another goal that we just don't recognize a lot of times when we do want something, but we're saying we can't get it. Sometimes there couldn't be other goals going on there too that
Mm-hmm.
we just don't see or notice, or we're not aware that is existing at the same time. And
Mm.
so we're, you know, like the example you used in one of your blogs was a piece of pie. You have the
Mm.
goal of wanting to be a certain size and stay fit in the way that you consider fit or be fit, but you also have another goal that you don't
Mm.
really recognize, which could be you want a huge rush of dopamine right now. You want to
Yeah.
eat the pie right now and get
Yep.
flooded now
Mm.
instead of later. And they're competing, but a lot of times people don't recognize that it's both of these, it's two goals going on competing at one
Yes.
time. And
Yeah.
I think life can get a lot better when you do recognize that there's competing goals going on there, when it seems a little contradictory and a little like, that's
Mm.
that's you know.
Yeah, the sense of contradiction is exactly what points to the different goals going on. Whenever there's a sense of forcing yourself to do something or trying really hard to be a certain way, that's usually a big red flag that there's something else on the other side that's restraining you or pushing you or holding you back, that you're kind of pushing against. And that's usually almost always another goal. But whenever you have to kind of force yourself to stick to a routine or eat a certain way, then there's the reason that you're forcing yourself is because there's something else in your own mind that's wanting a different outcome or a different course of action.
Yeah, that's definitely going to change how I think about stuff, for sure. Today I fell asleep, and I got upset for falling asleep because I had supposed to do a million things, but there was another goal going on that I just or I was trying to, I didn't actually fall asleep. I was trying to force myself not to, but clearly I want to take care of my body as much as
Mhm. And we do have physical bodies, we have physical limits. As much as we might want to, we can't go on indefinitely or not eat indefinitely, or there are things that if we don't attend to them, then our bodies just will take over. Natural forces will make us fall asleep or whatever. But yeah, the goals are at the bottom of most things that we do, I think.
Yeah, and just to remind everyone, it was like you were saying to get to maybe help you decide which goal is the goal you should go for is you kind of have to ask questions behind why, the lingering why of why do you want to complete this goal or why you
Hmm.
think the why question is really good and it can get you to deeper values to understand which one you really you want to prioritize
Mm.
more,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
instead of the mask, instead of the smoke screen to go a little deeper and really deal with that more so than, whatever it is you put as the uh I don't not excuse, but I wouldn't say excuse, but as the I don't know. I can't think.
We're always doing something.
Right.
Even doing nothing is doing something. So yeah, it all gets
Yeah.
back to goals.
It all comes back to balls. All right. So you wrote an article about asking, can you choose your views? And
Mm.
you can say we really don't choose our view, or you say we really don't choose our views. And the example you give is you gave an example. If we spoke about all of the reasons someone should be an anti-vaxxer who believed strongly in vaccinations, the person would have the information of, and the person has the information of why the other person chooses to be an anti-vaxxer, and they probably even understand, but they probably won't become an anti-vaxxer. Can you speak about do we really choose our views a little?
Yeah, and I think again it gets back to the levels of different goals. I think there are some things we definitely have that sense that we have complete control over the choices we make. Like if you go to a restaurant and you decide to have the margarita pizza rather than the meat lovers pizza, then you can certainly have a sense that you made that choice and you made that decision. And there are lots of things like that. But there are some more strongly held views that I guess we don't. We just see that that's the way the world is. So in America, for example, if you're a Republican voter, you probably couldn't just decide over the weekend that you're going to be a Democrat voter and you'd agree with the Democrat policies and so on. And similarly, people who are vegetarians and who have lived as a vegetarian for a long period of time probably couldn't just decide to have a break on the weekend and have a strip sirloin or go and have a hamburger or they couldn't just choose not to be a vegetarian, that it is something that at a very fundamental level, that's the way they see the world and the way the world is and the way they like to live their life. So it is, I think there's a sense where we like to have the idea of agency and autonomy and that we're the master of our own destiny and the captain of our own ship and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's absolutely correct. But I think there is also a kind of a kernel or a core element of us that maybe is a bit more enduring and harder to shift and harder to change.
I definitely see that. You write, people are their goals and not their actions. People change their actions in different environments to achieve their goals. Can you speak about that a little bit, Dr. Carey?
Yeah, yeah. So I think again, getting back to perspective, that my goals are my goals, and I know when they're happening from the inside looking out. I know when my world is the way I like it to be and the way I want it to be, and I know when it's kind of not quite like that. And so I need to act on the world out there in order to make it change the way I want it to change or to not change away from the way I like it to be. And so sometimes that will mean doing different things in different environments or even doing different things in the same environment because the conditions are changing. So as a really simple example, sometimes when I'm driving my car, sometimes I'll have to turn the steering wheel to the left and other times I'll have to turn it to the right to achieve the same goal of keeping it in the position on the road where I like it to be. So doing opposite things to achieve the same result is kind of the hallmark, if you like, of control. That idea of varying our actions in order to keep the same result happening.
Whatever whatever result you're trying to optimize for.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
And the
So
optimizing happens from the inside, from my perspective. So it's an experience, if you like. I know when I've optimized things because I get the sights that I want, or the sounds, or the tastes, or whatever.
it's subjective.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's things like, people can't put the right amount of salt on your steak for you. That's something that you have to kind of put on yourself, or the right amount of sugar in your coffee, or whatever.
Right.
It's something that you know when you've got the right amount because it's your experience.
That's right. So we did speak about or we spoke about control already in another podcast episode. So my audience can check that out. You right, everyone has a private collection of preferences about how they like things, like you just mentioned. You said control occurs whether we are completely aware of it or not. Controlling is most straightforward when we help the controlling efforts of others. Can you explain how by control can you explain by controlling, I don't know. Can you explain how controlling is by controlling the efforts of others? I don't know where I was going with this. How we can help the controlling efforts of other people. I'm a little confused. Sorry.
That's
Um,
okay. So the guy who developed this theory, William T. Powers, and the theory is called perceptual control theory. He had a quote from the late 1990s where he said, "The childhood of the human race is far from over. We have a long way to go before most people will understand that what they do for others is just as important to their well-being as what they do for themselves." And that's a really profound statement, I think, that it gets beyond, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's not really that idea of reciprocity. It's more a sense of, I need to help you regardless of what you do for me in return. That helping you, and it's kind of a bit selfish even. I need to help you because that's going to be good for me. And it really is like that. And when you understand the idea of goals and control and all that kind of stuff, I'm designed to, as I said before, to keep things in balance. So whenever anything puts things out of balance for me, I have to push back on that and rectify it. So when we're in a social group, we've all got our own goals and we're all acting on the same environment to get the goals that we want. So from time to time, the way you go about getting your goal is probably going to change the environment in a way that interferes with my goals. And I'm designed to push back. So I will do things to change the environment so they're right for my goals. And that will probably do things that interfere with your goals. So then you're going to have to do things on the environment to get things so that they're right again for you. So if we don't pay attention to what other people want, we're going to be creating a whole situation where people are just pushing back the whole time on the effects that other people are creating on the environment. And so, this idea about, if I pay attention to what you want and help you get the things that you want, that's going to make my environment better for me as well. So, it really is, it's not just a kind of a schmaltzy socialist sort of idea about getting everyone to play nicely together. It actually is an imperative that when people are in an environment that they both share, the most efficient way for them to share that environment is by helping each other make it be the way each other wants it to be.
right. Well said. You wrote about empathy and you talk about this in the golden rule. You wrote that the golden rule can be practiced better. And for those who can't think of what the golden rule is right now, it's do unto others what you would have them do to you. You write that, but you write that, yes, this is the golden rule, but assuming that we know what another person is thinking and feeling can destroy genuine understanding. Curiosity, compassion, ignorance, and humility are much more useful attitudes to adopt when help is provided to someone else. Can you speak about this a little bit, Dr. Carey?
Yeah, yeah, sure, man. That again gets back to the idea of perspective. I think it's kind of nice in some ways to get the idea that, we can share someone else's experiences and, walk a mile in another person's shoes and share the journey with them and all that kind of stuff. But um, the only sort of fly in the ointment, I guess, is that that's impossible. If we go with this idea of the first person perspective, then I can never know what your experience of something else is. And you can describe things to me, and I can imagine how that might be for me if I was in that situation. But I can never know how it was for you to be in that situation. And I don't actually think that's a bad thing. I think it actually, for me, from my perspective, it means that I work really hard to try and understand what it is for you to have been in that situation and to have experienced the things that you experience. So I ask lots of questions and I'm really curious about what it was and what you thought and what you felt and how it was for you. And so it's a way of actually, from that perspective, even being more interested and more open and inquiring more about the other person and their experiences rather than from a point of empathy. Empathy kind of implies I understand what it was like for you. And so I don't need to ask so many questions because it comes from a perspective of knowing, I know what it was to go through that. And I think that can become a really dangerous assumption because it's not so far to go from that to then, well, I know what's best for you. And because I know what it was like to be in that situation, I also know what you should do now from that experience you've had. And I think that can lead to people deciding for other people what course of action is most appropriate and what their experiences should be. And I think that's really dangerous and really counterproductive for developing harmonious social settings and good relationships and contented relationships with other people.
Right. Okay. Okay, you answered that one already. So, Dr. Carey, you broke the secret of contentment down to one sentence. You write, keeping the difference very small between the way the world is and the way we want it to be is the secret to contentment. And that's mostly about control again.
Yeah, yeah. And again, getting back to goals and making sure that all the things that we care about are in the states that we like them to be in. And as we talked about earlier, that can become a problem when we have goals about things being in opposite or incompatible states. And that from this perspective, that's the source of all psychological distress or angst or turmoil is about trying to reconcile those competing goals.
You write, you're not as special as you think you are. This article blew my mind. Here's a quote you wrote from the
Hmm.
article. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. You write in relation to the statement, you are always yourself. So when you're being
Mm.
disingenuous, it's still you at the moment. You're still trying to accomplish a goal, but I guess in a deceitful way. I came
Mm.
away realizing that when people say the statement, be yourself, they more so mean don't lie to me. What
Hmm.
is what I kind of took from that.
Yes.
So can you speak about that a little bit, Dr. Carey?
Well, yeah, just that idea that regardless of what you think you're doing or who you're being, you're always being yourself. And if you're trying to be someone else, then that just means you're you. And this is your being impersonating someone else you, but it's still you. And you can only ever be you. So it was really again, really just that idea that maybe sometimes it helps to lighten up a bit and chill out and realize that even if I think I'm not good enough as who I am, then there's no way out. I am always who I am, and that's all I can ever be. And I'm at every moment in time, I'm the best and the worst manifestation of me that I can be. That's where it starts and stops. That.
You wrote in an article changing the title of the article, I think it was, I'm not sure. What was this? Changing people instead of changing people's minds. You can't change people, but you can change people. Was the statement that you were thinking about in the article, and you came up with the discovery.
Ah, yeah, that was there was a really great quote I discovered a while ago that it was something along the lines of, I can't change the people in my world, but I can change the people in my world. And it was this really neat idea that I can't change other people. I can't make other people be different from how they are, but I can alter the people who are in my world who I interact with on a day-to-day basis. So I might have an overbearing, really critical manager and supervisor, and I can't change that manager and supervisor and make them be less critical and bossy, but I can change my environment so that I have a different manager and supervisor who is maybe not so critical and domineering. So it's that idea that um, we can't we can't change people, but we can change the people we interact with. And sometimes that's not so easy to do, and it can sometimes take a while to organize, but it's definitely possible.
Right. And I think that statement is extremely important in the context of the internet. Like
Mm.
watching, yeah, who you interact with on the internet is so important. And a lot of times people get on the internet and then they try to change people.
Hmm.
It's very interesting. They try to change people, they try to get them to come over to whatever side, whatever. And it's like, dude, just change the person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the internet. It's the easy, just with a click of a button. Just if your internet life is very unhealthy and you're doing a lot of arguing, or you're seeing a lot of arguing in your videos, or the content is just very divisive, it's the algorithm. You're just picking the people to
Yes.
be in your life that way. So I think it's very relevant to the internet.
And again, it gets back to goals. If someone is arguing with someone now, things can happen on the internet and you can have a one-off, blow up. But where you find yourself arguing repeatedly with different people and on different forums and over and over and over and over again, then again, that would suggest that there's something the person is getting out of these ongoing arguments and debates and disagreements and so on. And so if they're bothered about that, I mean, some people really like arguing with other
Yeah.
people, but if they find themselves doing it and they don't want to be doing it, then again, having a think about the goals that are going on for them and what they're getting out of putting forward their views and disagreeing with a whole bunch of different people at different times could be a useful thing to do.
That's true. There are people that do like to argue. I was
Mm.
actually talking to a doctor, I think last week, and she said she's a coach now, and she coaches healthcare. She coaches healthcare professionals, or just high earning professionals. And she said that from, I don't know if it was from the research she was looking at, or if it was from just her personal experience, if it was anecdotal, but she said doctors are, I don't want to misquote her, but she was saying something about something along the lines that doctors are have the most stressful profession, and the only profession that kind of comes close to that are lawyers. And we were trying to understand what that was, because with doctors, it's very obvious, or nurses, or anybody in healthcare, it's usually more obvious because you're more directly involved with somebody's life. But she said
Mm.
lawyers like to argue. The job was very stressful because a lot of the people that are attracted to law are very argumentative.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Carey, thank you so much. Where can, as always, it's been a pleasure. Where can the people find you?
It's been awesome chatting with you, Mia. I've got a website at drtimcarey.com. I'm also developing a YouTube channel called Control Matters that's got a lot of the stories you've talked about. I've created little videos of them. So I'm very Googleable. I'd love to get in touch with people if they think there's some things about these ideas that they'd like to know more about. And thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been really extraordinary of you to have these conversations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carey.